She was already surrounded when the footsteps stopped behind them. 3 tattooed men laughed until one of them recognized the man stepping out of the shadows. What happened in the next few seconds didn't make the news, but it decided who would never walk this street again. If this story pulled you in, go ahead and subscribe so you never miss what's ahead. I've got another unforgettable story coming tomorrow. And while you're here, drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing people tuned in from all over the world. Okay, let's get back into it. The narrow street was darker than it should have been for 9 p.m. Finn Dam was walking alone, finishing business in an alley just off the main road, moving with the measured steps of a man who owned the night. Then he heard it, a voice elderly, trembling. "Please, I just want to go home." Finn could have ignored it. Most men in his position would have, but that's not what happened. Finn stopped moving. 30 feet down the street, he saw 3 hooded figures surrounding an elderly woman clutching grocery bags, trying to back away. What happened in the next 3 minutes would change that street forever and teach those 3 men why some names are spoken in whispers. This is one of those stories that never made the news, but the whole neighborhood remembers. Now, to understand how a quiet night turned into a confrontation that left an entire block silent with fear, we need to go back to the beginning of that evening. It was late evening, sometime around 8:30 p.m. Hannah Michelle lived alone in a small apartment, tucked away on the quieter side of the city, the kind of neighborhood where people knew their neighbors, but minded their business. She had lived there for years, long enough to watch the buildings age alongside her, long enough to see families move in and out while she remained. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a tired brick building, with narrow hallways that smelled faintly of cooking oil and old carpet. It wasn't much. 1 bedroom, a kitchen barely large enough for a table, a living room with a single armchair positioned by the window where she could watch the street below. But it was hers, and at 76 years old, peace mattered more to Hannah than convenience. That evening, she had made the same decision she'd made countless times before. She needed groceries, and she would walk to get them. The small market was only a few blocks away, a corner store run by a Korean family who had known her for over a decade. The son always greeted her by name. The mother packed her bags carefully, making sure the bread didn't get crushed. It was the kind of place that still felt personal in a city that had mostly forgotten what that meant. Hannah had gone just after dinner, when the light was fading but the streets were still awake. She walked slowly, her cane tapping a steady rhythm against the pavement. Her purse hung across her shoulder. Her coat, beige and worn at the elbows, was buttoned against the cool evening air. Inside the market, she moved through the aisles with practiced efficiency. Bread, canned soup, a box of tea bags, butter, a small carton of milk. Nothing unusual, nothing extravagant, just enough to last her through the week. The cashier rang her up with a smile. "You need help with the bags, missus?" "Michelle?" "No, thank you," Hannah said, her voice soft but firm. "I'm fine." She always said that. She paid in exact change, bills smoothed flat, coins counted carefully. The cashier handed her 2 brown paper bags, and Hannah tucked them against her chest, 1 in each arm. Then she stepped back out into the night. The street was quieter now. The dinner crowd had thinned. A few scattered pedestrians moved along the sidewalks, heads down, lost in their own thoughts. The hum of distant traffic filled the spaces between footsteps. Hannah didn't call a cab. She never did. She chose to walk. It wasn't stubbornness, exactly. It was independence. It was the refusal to let age dictate her choices. Walking kept her strong, kept her present, kept her connected to the city she had lived in her entire life. The route home was simple. 2 blocks east, then a left turn onto the narrow street that led to her building. She had walked it 100 times. 1,000 times. It had always felt safe. Hannah turned onto that street and immediately noticed how quiet it was. Too quiet. The streetlights here were older, spaced farther apart. Half of them flickered weakly. The other half had burned out entirely. The buildings on either side rose like dark walls, windows glowing faintly behind drawn curtains. Her footsteps echoed. She walked slowly, the grocery bags growing heavier with each step. Her cane clicked against the pavement, in a rhythm she'd long stopped noticing. Then she heard something else. Footsteps behind her. At first, she told herself it was nothing. Someone else walking home. Someone minding their own business, just like her. But the footsteps didn't fade. They matched her pace. Hannah's grip on the bags tightened. She told herself not to panic, not to look back. Just keep walking. Just get home. She quickened her pace slightly. So did the footsteps. Her heart began to pound, slow at first, then faster. The bags felt heavier now. Her cane felt less steady. The street ahead seemed impossibly long. She told herself she was imagining it, but she wasn't. The footsteps grew closer, and then she heard something worse. Laughter. Low. Mocking. Just loud enough to let her know she'd been noticed. Hannah's breath caught in her throat. Her hands began to shake. She didn't want to turn around, didn't want to see who was behind her, but she could feel them now. 3 of them. Close enough that she could hear their breathing. Close enough that their presence felt like a shadow pressing against her back. She walked faster, her cane tapping frantically now, her bags threatening to slip from her arms. The laughter came again, then a voice. "Yo, Grandma!" Hannah stopped. She didn't mean to. Her body just froze. Slowly, she turned around. 3 young men stood behind her, spread out across the narrow street. They wore dark hoodies pulled low over their faces. Tattoos crawled up their necks, visible even in the dim light. Their hands were in their pockets. Their postures were relaxed, but their eyes weren't. The one in the middle, tall, grinning, stepped forward. "You walkin' somewhere important?" he asked. Hannah's voice shook. "Please, I just want to go home." The one on the left laughed. "Relax, we just want to see what you got." The one on the right moved closer, his hand reaching toward one of her bags. "And maybe some cash," he added. "You gotta have something." Hannah's heart hammered in her chest. Her hands trembled so badly she almost dropped the bags. The street was silent, too silent. And then, footsteps, different ones, measured, heavy, unhurried. From the mouth of a narrow alley just ahead, a figure stepped out into the street. A man in a black suit, no tie, collar open, tattoos climbing his neck and disappearing beneath the fabric. His face was unreadable cold, calm, like a man watching something he'd already decided the outcome of. Findam. He had been finishing business in that alley. He hadn't planned on stopping, but when he heard Hannah's trembling voice echo down the empty street, he did. He looked at the scene for only a second. Then he started walking toward them. Hannah had sensed them before she saw them. It started as instinct, that animal awareness that tells you when you're being watched, when you're no longer alone. She had tried to dismiss it at first, the way people do when fear feels irrational, when acknowledging danger seems worse than ignoring it. But instinct doesn't lie. The 3 men had appeared behind her somewhere between the market and the turn onto her street. Hannah couldn't pinpoint the exact moment. One second, the street felt empty. The next, she heard their voices, low murmurs, casual laughter, the kind that belongs to young men who own the night. She had quickened her pace then, her cane tapping faster against the pavement. They matched her speed. That's when she knew. The one in the middle was tall, broad-shouldered beneath his dark hoodie. Even from behind, Hannah could see the tattoos crawling up his neck, dark ink that disappeared into the fabric. He walked with a loose, confident stride, hands buried in his pockets, head slightly tilted, as if listening to music only he could hear. His name was Trick. Not his real name, but the one everyone used. He'd earned it young, running cons on tourists, lifting wallets, talking his way out of trouble with a grin that made people want to believe him. He was 24 now, too old to still be playing street games, but too comfortable to stop. He nudged the man beside him. "You see Grandma up there?" The second man, shorter, stockier, with a neck thick as a tree trunk, laughed. His name was Cody. He had tattoos too, though his were cruder, done in basements and back seats by friends who didn't know what they were doing. He'd spent 2 years in county for assault. Got out 6 months ago. Hadn't learned a thing. "Yeah, I see her," Cody said, his voice rough from too many cigarettes. "Walking kinda fast, ain't she?" The third man said nothing. He just watched. His name was Randy, and he was the quietest of the 3. Lean, wiry, with hollow cheeks and eyes that never seemed to focus on anything for long. He had a scar across his left eyebrow from a fight he didn't remember. He moved like a shadow, always half a step behind, always watching, always waiting for someone else to make the first move. Randy didn't talk much, but when things got ugly, he was always there. Trick grinned. "Let's see what she's got." They weren't in a hurry. That was the thing Hannah noticed, the terrible, sickening thing that made her stomach twist. They weren't rushing. They were taking their time, like hunters who knew their prey couldn't outrun them. Hannah's breath came faster now. The grocery bags felt impossibly heavy. The street stretched endlessly ahead. Her building was still 2 blocks away. Too far. Much too far. She told herself to stay calm. to keep walking, to not look back. But she could hear them now, their footsteps, their laughter, the scrape of shoes against pavement. "Yo, she's really moving now," Cody said, louder this time, loud enough for her to hear. Hannah's heart slammed against her ribs. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped one of the bags. A can of soup shifted, pressing against the thin paper. "Don't run," she told herself. "Don't give them a reason." But her body didn't listen. Her pace quickened, her cane tapping frantically, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Behind her, the footsteps quickened too. They were playing with her now. She could hear it in their laughter, the cruel amusement of young men who had forgotten what it felt like to be afraid. "Hey, Grandma," Trick called out. "You training for a marathon or something?" Cody laughed. Randy said nothing. Hannah's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. She blinked them back, forced herself to keep moving. Just a little farther. Just get home. Lock the door. Be safe. But the footsteps were right behind her now, so close she could hear their breathing. "Yo," Trick said again, his voice sharp now. "I'm talking to you." Hannah stopped. She didn't want to. Every fiber of her being screamed at her to keep moving, to ignore them, to pretend this wasn't happening, but her legs wouldn't move anymore. Slowly, so slowly she turned around. They stood barely 10 feet away, spread out across the narrow street like wolves circling prey. Their faces were young, younger than she'd expected. Boys, really, but there was nothing boyish in their eyes. Trick stepped forward, that easy grin still on his face. "Damn, Grandma, you really had us working back there." Hannah's voice came out as a whisper. "Please, I don't want any trouble." "Trouble?" Cody repeated, stepping to her left. "Who said anything about trouble? We just want to talk." Randy moved to her right, silent as a ghost. They were surrounding her now, practiced, efficient, like they'd done this before. Hannah clutched the grocery bags tighter, as if they could somehow protect her. I don't have much, just groceries. I just want to go home." Trick's grin widened. "See, that's the thing. You say you don't have much, but," he gestured at the bags, "you got something, and we're curious." Cody reached out, his thick fingers brushing against one of the paper bags. Hannah pulled it back instinctively. "Please don't." "Relax," Cody said, his voice mock-soothing. "We just want to see what you got in there, that's all. And maybe some cash," Randy added quietly from behind her. His voice was soft, almost polite. Somehow that made it worse. "You gotta have something." Hannah's knees felt weak. Her cane trembled in her grip. The street was empty completely, impossibly empty. No cars, no pedestrians, no one to help. She opened her mouth to scream, but her throat closed up. No sound came out. Trick stepped closer, close enough that she could smell cologne mixed with sweat. "You gonna make this easy, or—" He stopped mid-sentence. They all did, because from somewhere ahead, from the mouth of a narrow alley just beyond the broken streetlight, came the sound of footsteps. Different footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, unhurried. Trick's head turned. Cody's hand dropped from the grocery bag. Randy went perfectly still. A figure emerged from the shadows. A man in a black suit, collar open, no tie. Tattoos climbed his neck like vines, dark against pale skin. His face was hard, angular, expressionless. His eyes cold, calculating, swept across the scene with the detached interest of someone assessing a problem. Finn Dam stepped into the streetlight, and everything changed. For a moment, no one moved. Hannah stood frozen between the three men, her grocery bags trembling in her arms, her breath coming in shallow gasps. The street felt smaller now, the shadows deeper, the silence heavier. Trick was the first to recover. He glanced at Finn, then back at Hannah, his grin faltering for just a second before returning force now. Defensive. "This ain't your business," Trick said, his voice carrying an edge it hadn't had before. Finn didn't respond. He just kept walking, his footsteps echoing against the pavement with the steady rhythm of a clock ticking down. Cody shifted his weight, moving slightly closer to Hannah. His hand hovered near her grocery bag again, but his eyes were on Finn now. "You should keep walking, man. Seriously." Still, Finn said nothing. Randy backed up a half step, his body angling toward the alley behind them. His eyes darted between Finn and his friends, calculating, waiting. Hannah could barely breathe. Her heart hammered so hard she thought it might burst through her chest. The three men were still around her. Trick in front, Cody to her left, Randy circling behind, but their attention had shifted. They were watching Finn now, trying to decide if he was a threat or just another witness who'd walk away. Trick stepped forward, blocking Hannah's path completely now. He spread his arms slightly, making himself bigger. "Look, we're just having a conversation here. Nothing to do with you." Finn stopped 10 feet away. He looked at Trick for a long moment, his expression completely unreadable. Then his eyes moved to Cody, then to Randy. Then, finally, to Hannah. Their eyes met. Hannah saw something in his face she hadn't expected recognition. Not of her specifically, but of the situation, of what was happening, of what these three men intended to do. And beneath that recognition, something colder, decision. Finn's gaze returned to Trick. When he spoke, his voice was quiet, almost conversational. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" The question hung in the air like smoke. Trick's grin disappeared entirely. "Man, I told you." "I heard what you said." Finn took another step forward. "I'm asking what you think you're doing surrounding an old woman on an empty street." Cody puffed out his chest, trying to match Finn's energy. "3 of us, 1 of you. Do the math." Randy said nothing, but he moved closer to Hannah from behind, close enough that she could feel his presence like a shadow pressing against her back. Hannah wanted to scream, wanted to run, but her legs wouldn't move. Her voice wouldn't come. She stood there, trapped between predators and a stranger whose intentions she couldn't read. Was he going to help her? Or was this about to get worse? Finn's eyes flicked to Randy, who froze mid-step. 3 of you, Finn repeated slowly, as if tasting the words. Then something shifted in his expression. Not anger exactly, but something far more dangerous. Amusement. "You think that matters?" Trick bristled. "The hell's that supposed to mean?" "It means," Finn said, his voice dropping lower, "you're making a mistake." Cody laughed sharp, nervous. "Yeah? What kind of mistake?" Finn didn't answer right away. He just looked at them, really looked at them, the way someone might examine insects under glass. Then he tilted his head slightly, and the ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You don't know who I am, do you?" The question landed like a stone in water. Trick's bravado wavered, his eyes narrowed, searching Finn's face, trying to place him. Something flickered there, vague recognition, maybe, or just the beginning of doubt. Cody glanced at Trick, uncertainty creeping into his posture. Randy took another half-step back. They knew. Not consciously, perhaps, but somewhere deep in their survival instincts, they knew they'd made a mistake. Finn saw it. "No?" he said softly. "Then let me introduce myself." He took another step forward, then another. Slow, deliberate, closing the distance with the inevitability of a storm rolling in. Trick held his ground, but his hands came out of his pockets. "Man, you need to back the hell up." "Or what?" Finn asked. The question was so casual, so genuinely curious, that it took Trick a second to respond. "Or we make you," Cody said, stepping forward to stand beside Trick. Randy moved too, flanking them, creating a wall between Finn and Hannah, 3 against 1. Hannah's hands shook so badly now that one of her grocery bags slipped. A can of soup tumbled out, rolling across the pavement with a hollow metallic sound that echoed too loudly in the silence. No one moved to pick it up. Finn looked down at the can, then back at the 3 men. Then he laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not a mocking one, amused. Genuinely amused, like he'd just heard the funniest joke of his life. That laugh changed everything. Trick's confidence cracked. "The hell are you laughing at?" Finn's smile widened, but there was nothing warm in it, nothing human. "You really think you're going to make me do anything?" "We will if we have to," Cody said, but his voice had lost its edge. Finn stopped smiling. The shift was instant, like watching a light go out. His expression went completely flat, empty of everything except cold calculation. "Let her go," he said quietly. Trick shook his head. "Man, I already told you. Let her go." The words were soft, almost gentle, but underneath them was something that made Hannah's skin prickle with a different kind of fear. Not fear of Trick or Cody or Randy, fear of what Finn was about to do. Trick must have felt it too, because his hand moved to his waistband, his fingers brushing against something hidden there. "You want a problem? We can give you a problem." Finn's eyes dropped to Trick's hand, then back to his face. "You pull that out?" Finn said, his voice barely above a whisper. "And I'll make you eat it." The silence that followed was suffocating. Hannah could hear her own heartbeat, could hear the distant hum of traffic blocks away, could hear the faint rustle of wind against paper bags. Randy spoke for the first time in minutes, his voice tight with something that might have been fear. "Trick. Man. I think we should—" "Shut up," Trick snapped, but his hand moved away from his waistband. Finn saw it. Smart. Cody stepped forward, trying to salvage the situation. "Look, we don't want trouble. But you're making this a thing when it doesn't have to be." He didn't get to finish. Because Finn moved. Fast. Faster than any of them expected. He closed the distance between himself and Cody in 2 strides, his hand shooting out and catching Cody by the throat before the younger man could react. Cody's eyes went wide. He grabbed at Finn's wrist, trying to pull free, but Finn's grip was iron. "I said," Finn repeated calmly, as if he wasn't currently choking someone. "Let her go." Trick and Randy froze. Hannah gasped, stumbling backward, her remaining grocery bag falling to the ground, and the street held its breath. Finn held Cody by the throat for exactly 3 seconds, not long enough to do real damage, just long enough to make a point. When he released him, Cody stumbled backward, gasping, his hands flying to his neck. His eyes were wide with shock, and something he hadn't felt in years, genuine fear. Trick's hand moved toward his waistband again, faster this time, but Finn's eyes locked onto him with such cold intensity that Trick's fingers froze mid-reach. "Don't," Finn said simply. 1 word. That's all it took. Trick's hand dropped. Randy had backed up another step, putting distance between himself and the situation. His hollow eyes darted toward the alley behind them, calculating escape routes, wondering if he could run without his friends noticing. Finn saw it. "You run, I'll find you." Randy stopped moving. Hannah stood pressed against the wall of a building now, her scattered groceries forgotten at her feet. She watched this stranger in the black suit, with a mixture of terror and desperate hope. She didn't know who he was, didn't know if he was saving her or just claiming her for himself. But something in his eyes when he'd looked at her earlier told her she wasn't his target. They were. Finn adjusted his collar slowly, deliberately, drawing their attention to the tattoos that climbed his neck and disappeared beneath the fabric of his shirt. The ink was dark, intricate, the kind of work that took years and told stories to anyone who knew how to read them. Cody recognized them first. His face went pale. Oh shit. Trick's eyes narrowed, studying the tattoos more carefully now. The symbols, the patterns, the marks that meant something in certain circles, to certain people. Recognition dawned slowly, then all at once. "Your trick started," but his voice cracked. Finn tilted his head slightly. "Go ahead, say it." Trick swallowed hard. His bravado was gone now, stripped away like old paint. "You're Finn Dam." The name settled over the street like a shroud. Randy actually flinched. Cody took another step back, his hand still rubbing his throat where Finn's fingers had been. Hannah didn't recognize the name. She'd lived in this neighborhood for decades but had always kept to herself, never getting involved in the darker currents that ran beneath the city's surface. But she recognized the fear in their eyes, and that told her everything she needed to know. Finn didn't confirm or deny. He just watched them, his expression unreadable, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Trick tried to recover, tried to find some shred of dignity in the situation. "Look, man, we didn't know." "Didn't know what?" Finn interrupted. His voice was still quiet, still calm. Somehow that made it worse. "Didn't know you were cornering an elderly woman? Or didn't know you were doing it on my street?" "Your street?" Cody said, then immediately looked like he regretted it. Finn's eyes shifted to him. "My street." There was no room for argument in those words, no negotiation, just fact. Randy spoke up, his voice thin and desperate. "We're sorry, man. We'll leave. Right now. We'll just—" "You'll just what?" Finn asked. "Walk away? Go find someone else to terrorize on a different street? Is that the plan?" No one answered. Finn looked at each of them in turn, Trick with his hollow bravado, Cody with his bruised throat and wounded pride, Randy with his coward's eyes always searching for the exit. "You know what the problem is with people like you?" Finn said conversationally, as if they were discussing the weather. "You think strength is just about numbers, 3 against 1, 3 against an old woman. You think that's power." He took a step toward them. They all took a step back. "But power isn't about numbers," Finn continued. "It's about certainty. It's about knowing. Really knowing that when you make a move, you can follow through. Another step forward. Another step back. And right now," Finn said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper, "I am certain about what happens next if you don't walk away." Trick's jaw clenched. He was trying to hold on to something pride, Reputation, the image he'd built of himself as someone who didn't back down. You can't just... Finn laughed again, that same dark, amused sound that had unsettled them before. Can't what? He asked. You're on my street, threatening someone under my protection, and you're telling me what I can't do? We didn't know she was, Cody started. She wasn't, Finn interrupted, until you touched her. Now she is. The declaration hung in the air like a brand. Hannah's breath caught. She hadn't asked for protection, hadn't asked for any of this. But as she looked at these three young men with their tattoos and their violence and their casual cruelty, she understood that she needed it, whether she'd asked for it or not. Trick was shaking now, not from fear exactly, but from the rage of humiliation. So what? We're supposed to just apologize and leave? No, Finn said calmly. Trick blinked. No? Apologies don't mean anything from people like you, Finn explained, his tone almost professorial. You'd say whatever you needed to say to get out of here, and tomorrow you'd be right back at it. Different street, maybe, different victim, but the same pathetic game. He glanced at Hannah, his expression softening for just a moment. Ma'am, are you hurt? Hannah shook her head, not trusting her voice. Finn nodded. Then he looked back at the three men, and the softness vanished. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to pick up her groceries. All of them. You're going to put them back in the bags carefully. Then you're going to hand them to her. And then you're going to walk, not run. Walk to the end of this street and disappear. Cody's face twisted with indignation. You want us to... I don't want anything, Finn said coldly. I'm telling you what you're going to do, unless you'd prefer the alternative. What alternative? Randy asked, his voice barely audible. Finn's smile returned, and it was the most frightening thing Hannah had ever seen. You really want to find out? No one moved for several long seconds. Then Trick bent down and picked up the can of soup that had rolled across the pavement. His hands were shaking. Cody and Randy followed, gathering the scattered items, bread, tea bags, the small carton of milk that had somehow survived the fall. They worked in silence, their movements stiff with humiliation and barely suppressed rage. When they finished, Trick held out the bags to Hannah. She took them with trembling hands. Thank you, she whispered, though the word felt absurd. Finn watched them all. Now walk. They did. They made it 15 feet before Trick stopped walking. Hannah saw it happen. She'd been clutching her grocery bags, still pressed against the wall, watching the three men retreat with their heads down and their pride shattered. But Trick's shoulders tensed. His footsteps slowed, then stopped completely. Finn saw it too. He didn't move, didn't speak, just waited. Nah, Trick said, his voice low and tight. Nah, man. This is bullshit. Cody and Randy froze. Randy's eyes went wide, his head shaking almost imperceptibly, a silent plea for Trick to shut up and keep walking. But Trick turned around. You think you can just embarrass us like that? His voice was rising now, anger burning through the fear. Make us pick up groceries like we're some kind of... Keep walking, Finn said quietly. Fuck that. Trick's hand moved to his waistband, and this time he didn't stop. He pulled out a knife, nothing fancy, just a folding blade with a worn handle, the kind of weapon carried by someone who'd used it before. You think just because you got a reputation, you can treat people like... He didn't finish the sentence. Because Finn moved, there was no warning. No shift in posture. No tension in his shoulders. 1 second he was standing still. The next he was closing the distance between them with the speed and precision of a predator who'd done this 1,000 times before. Trick barely had time to raise the knife before Finn's hand locked around his wrist. The sound of bone meeting bone echoed down the empty street, a sickening crack, as Finn twisted Trick's arm with brutal efficiency. The knife clattered to the pavement. Trick screamed. Finn swept his leg, and Trick went down hard, his back slamming against the wet asphalt with a sound that made Hannah wince. The whole thing took maybe 2 seconds. Cody reacted on instinct, lunging forward with his fists raised. He was bigger than Finn, heavier, built like someone who'd won fights through sheer mass before. It didn't matter. Finn sidestepped the first punch with minimal effort, then drove his elbow into Cody's ribs with surgical precision. The air left Cody's lungs in a whoosh. Before he could recover, Finn grabbed the back of his hoodie and used his own momentum against him, sending him sprawling into the brick wall with a force that shook the night air. Cody crumpled, gasping for breath. Randy stood frozen, his eyes darting between his two friends on the ground and the man who'd put them there without breaking a sweat. Run, Finn said, looking directly at him. Randy ran. He made it 3 steps before Finn caught him. Finn's hand closed around the back of Randy's neck, not violently, but with enough pressure to stop him cold. I said walk, not run. Randy whimpered an actual whimper, high and terrified. Please, man. I didn't. Finn spun him around and shoved him backward. Randy stumbled, tripped over his own feet, and landed hard on the pavement next to Trick. All 3 of them were on the ground now. Finn stood over them, breathing normally, his suit barely disheveled. He looked like a man who'd just finished a casual conversation, not someone who'd just dismantled 3 attackers in under 10 seconds. Hannah couldn't move, couldn't breathe. She'd never seen violence like this, not in person, not this close. It was nothing like the movies. There was no dramatic music, no slow motion, just brutal, efficient movements, and the terrible sounds of bodies hitting pavement. And the silence that followed. Trick rolled onto his side, cradling his wrist. His face was twisted in pain and rage, and something that might have been tears. You broke my fucking arm. No, Finn said calmly. I dislocated your wrist. You'll heal. Cody was still trying to catch his breath, one hand pressed against his ribs. His face had gone pale. You can't. I can, Finn interrupted. And I just did. Randy lay flat on his back, staring up at the night sky, not moving. Maybe he was hoping if he stayed still enough, Finn would forget he existed. Finn crouched down, bringing himself eye level with Trick. I gave you a chance to walk away. You chose this. You humiliated us, Trick spat, though his voice shook. What did you expect? I expected you to be smart enough to value your life over your pride, Finn said. I was wrong. He stood up, looking down at all 3 of them. His expression hadn't changed, still cold, still unreadable. But there was something in his eyes now. Something that made Hannah's stomach twist. Certainty. You ever come near this street again? Finn said, his voice carrying the weight of absolute truth. You won't leave it walking. The words weren't a threat. They were a promise. Trick tried to sit up, failed, fell back with a groan. Man, who the hell do you think you... Finn's foot came down next to Trick's head, close enough to make him flinch. I think I'm the man who owns this street. I think I'm the man who just put 3 of you on your backs without breaking a sweat. And I think I'm the man who's giving you one chance to crawl away and never come back. He lifted his foot, stepped back. Get up. They didn't move at first. Then, slowly, painfully, they began to pull themselves off the ground. Trick clutched his wrist, whimpering. Cody leaned against the wall, still struggling to breathe. Randy was the first on his feet, his legs shaking so badly he could barely stand. Walk, Finn said again. This time, they did. They limped down the street, supporting each other, their tough guy swagger completely gone. Trick looked back once, his eyes burning with humiliation and rage. Finn met his gaze and smiled. Trick looked away and kept walking. Hannah watched them disappear around the corner, their footsteps fading into the night. Then, finally, the silence returned deeper now, heavier. Finn turned to her, and his expression shifted. The coldness melted away, replaced by something gentler. Concern, maybe. Or just exhaustion. Are you all right? He asked. Hannah nodded, though her hands were still shaking so badly she could barely hold the grocery bags. One of them had torn during the chaos. Items poked through the ripped paper bread, tea, the small carton of milk. Finn saw it. Without asking, he bent down and retrieved a plastic bag that had blown against the wall. He carefully transferred her groceries into it, making sure nothing was damaged. You live far? He asked. 2 blocks, Hannah whispered. Her voice sounded strange to her own ears, distant, disconnected. I'll walk you. It wasn't a question. Hannah wanted to protest, wanted to say she could manage on her own. But the truth was, she couldn't. Her legs felt like water. Her heart was still hammering. The adrenaline was starting to fade, leaving behind a trembling exhaustion. Thank you, she said quietly. Finn picked up the remaining bag and started walking. Hannah followed, her cane tapping softly against the pavement. Neither of them spoke. The street remained silent, too silent, like it was holding its breath, waiting to see what came next. Finn walked Hannah to her building without speaking. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, it was necessary. She needed time to process what had just happened, and he wasn't the type to fill quiet spaces with meaningless words. Her building was exactly what he'd expected. Old brick, narrow entrance, the kind of place where elderly people lived out their final years in small apartments that smelled like tea and memory. The front door stuck when she pushed it. Finn reached past her and pulled it open with a firm tug. "Third floor," Hannah said, her voice still shaky. "I'll carry these up," Finn replied, nodding at the grocery bags. She wanted to refuse, wanted to reclaim some sense of independence after feeling so helpless, but her legs were trembling too much. She simply nodded and led the way up the narrow staircase, her cane clicking against each step. The hallway on the third floor was dimly lit, wallpaper peeling at the corners. Hannah stopped at apartment 3C and fumbled with her keys. Her hands were still shaking. Finn waited patiently. When she finally got the door open, she turned to him, taking the bags carefully. I don't know how to thank you." "You don't need to," Finn said. "But you saved." "I did what anyone should have done." His voice was firm but not unkind. "Get some rest. Lock your door. You're safe now." Hannah's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back since the moment those 3 men had surrounded her. Will they come back?" Finn's expression hardened slightly. "No, they won't." The certainty in his voice should have comforted her. Instead, it reminded her of the violence she'd just witnessed, the ease with which he'd dismantled 3 younger men, the cold precision in every movement. "Who are you?" she asked quietly. Finn smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just someone who lives in the neighborhood. Good night, Mrs. Michelle," she said. "Hannah Michelle." "Good night, Mrs. Michelle." He turned and walked back down the hallway before she could say anything else. Hannah stood in her doorway, watching him disappear down the stairs. Then she went inside, locked the door, and for the first time in years, she pushed her small armchair against it, just in case. Finn emerged from Hannah's building and stood on the empty street for a moment, his eyes scanning the darkness. The neighborhood was quiet, too quiet now, as if the violence from earlier had scared even the ambient noise into hiding. He pulled out his phone and made a call. "Yeah?" a gruff voice answered. "It's me," Finn said. "I need eyes on a street. The one off Patterson, near the old market." "What happened?" 3 idiots tried to rob an old woman. I handled it, but they might come back with friends." There was a pause. "You want me to send people?" "Just watchers. I don't think they're stupid enough to try again, but..." Finn trailed off, thinking about Trick's eyes when he'd looked back. That rage, that humiliation. Keep an eye out anyway. "Done." Finn hung up and started walking. Not toward home, but back to the alley where this had all started. His actual business for the evening, a meeting with a supplier who owed him money, had been interrupted, but that could wait until tomorrow. Some things were more important than money. 2 miles across the city, in a cramped apartment that smelled like stale beer and cigarette smoke, Trick sat on a sagging couch with his wrist wrapped in a torn t-shirt. "It's not broken," Randy said nervously, hovering nearby. "I think it's just..." "I know what it is," Trick snapped. His wrist throbbed with a deep, nauseating pain that made it hard to think straight. But it was nothing compared to the rage burning in his chest. Cody leaned against the wall, still holding his ribs. Each breath hurt, sharp and stabbing. "We should go to the hospital." "And say what?" Trick shot back. "That Finn Dam kicked our asses? That we tried to rob some old lady and got what we deserved?" "We didn't even rob her," Randy muttered. "We were just..." "Shut up," Trick and Cody said in unison. Randy shut up. Silence filled the apartment, broken only by the drip of a leaking faucet in the kitchen and the distant wail of sirens. Trick stared at the far wall, replaying the fight in his mind. No, not a fight. Fights were what happened between equals. What happened tonight was an execution. Clean, efficient, humiliating. "We can't just let this go," Trick said finally. Cody looked at him like he'd lost his mind. "Are you serious?" "That was Finn Dam. You know who he is, right? What he does?" "I know," Trick said through gritted teeth. "Then you know we need to drop this," Cody insisted. "We walk away. We find a different street. We forget this ever happened." "Forget?" Trick's voice rose, cracking with emotion. "He made us pick up groceries like we were his servants. He embarrassed us in front of that old woman. He broke my wrist, dislocated," Randy corrected quietly, then wilted under Trick's glare. "Whatever," Trick spat. "Point is, we can't just let him humiliate us like that." Cody pushed off the wall despite the pain in his ribs. "Yes, we can, because the alternative is worse, way worse." "What are you saying? That we're just going to hide?" "I'm saying we're going to survive." Cody shot back. You know what Finn Dam does to people who come after him? They disappear. Not arrested, not beaten. They just vanish. Randy's face had gone pale. Maybe Cody's right, man. Maybe we should what? Trick stood up, cradling his injured wrist. Spend the rest of our lives afraid to walk down the wrong street? Afraid some guy in a suit is going to show up and put us on our asses again? Yes, Cody yelled. That's exactly what we should do, because at least we'll be alive. Trick shook his head slowly. You don't get it. This isn't about him anymore. It's about us, about respect. You think anyone's going to take us seriously after tonight? Word gets out that Finn Dam made us his bitches. We're done. Finished. Word's not going to get out, Randy said hopefully. Nobody saw. He saw, Trick interrupted, pointing vaguely in the direction of the street. And he'll talk. He'll tell his people what happened, and they'll tell other people. And by next week everyone will know. Cody's jaw tightened. So what do you want to do? March back there and get killed? No, Trick said slowly. A dark smile crossed his face. I want to be smart about it. Randy's stomach dropped. Trick, don't. We can't take him in a straight fight, Trick continued, his mind already working through possibilities. But nobody's untouchable. Even Finn Dam has blind spots. This is a mistake, Cody said quietly. Maybe, Trick agreed, but I'd rather make a mistake than live like a coward. The apartment fell silent again. Outside, the city continued its nightly rhythm, cars passing, voices echoing, life moving forward. But inside that cramped apartment, 3 young men sat in the darkness, nursing their wounds and their pride, and planning something that would haunt them far more than a dislocated wrist ever could. 3 days passed. Hannah Michelle returned to her routine small trips to the market, walks around her neighborhood, tea by the window. But something had changed. She moved differently now, her eyes scanning every shadow, her pace quickening when footsteps echoed behind her. She didn't walk down that street anymore. Finn went about his business as usual. Meetings in back rooms, conversations that ended with handshakes or threats, the daily maintenance of an empire built on fear and loyalty. He didn't think much about the 3 men he'd put on the ground. He should have. The plan took shape slowly, pieced together over cheap beer and cheaper cigarettes in Trick's apartment. We need to know his patterns, Trick said, leaning over a notebook with street names scrawled across the pages. His wrist was still wrapped, still throbbing, but he could use it now. Where he goes, when he's alone. Cody sat across from him, still holding his ribs when he breathed too deeply. You're talking about surveillance, about following Finn Dam. You understand how insane that is? You got a better idea? Cody didn't. Randy paced near the window, nervous energy radiating from every movement. What if he catches us watching him? He won't, Trick said with more confidence than he felt. We stay distant. We're careful. We watch from places he doesn't expect. He's got people, Cody pointed out. Eyes everywhere. That's what they say. They say a lot of things, Trick replied. Half of it's probably bullshit. Reputation, fear, mind games. But even as he said it, he remembered the cold certainty in Finn's eyes, the brutal efficiency of his movements. That hadn't been reputation. That had been real. We do this smart, Trick continued, trying to convince himself as much as them. We find a blind spot, wait for the right moment. Then we what? Randy interrupted, his voice sharp with panic. Kill him? You want to kill Finn Dam? The question hung in the air like poison gas. Trick didn't answer right away. He stared at the notebook, at the street names, at the crude map of a neighborhood that belonged to someone else. I want payback, he said finally. However that looks. Cody and Randy exchanged glances. Neither spoke. Outside, the city hummed with life. Inside that apartment, 3 men convinced themselves they were brave enough to hunt a predator. They started watching the next day. Randy took the first shift, posted up in a coffee shop across from a building Finn was rumored to own. He nursed a single cup of black coffee for 3 hours, watching the entrance with hollow, nervous eyes. Finn never showed. Cody tried the following afternoon, standing on a street corner pretending to scroll through his phone while watching a restaurant where Finn supposedly had lunch meetings. Nothing. Trick took evenings, lingering in shadows near the alley where this had all started, hoping Finn would return to the scene. He didn't. After 4 days of watching nothing happen, they regrouped. Maybe he's not even in the city, Randy suggested, desperate for any excuse to stop this madness. He's here, Trick insisted. We're just looking in the wrong places. Or he knows we're looking, Cody said quietly. The words landed like a stone. "No," Trick said, but uncertainty crept into his voice. "No, there's no way he—" "Think about it," Cody interrupted. "We've been watching his spots for days. You don't think someone noticed? Someone who works for him? Someone who reports back?" Randy's face went pale. Oh God, if he knows." "He doesn't know," Trick snapped. "We've been careful." But had they? Randy thought back to the coffee shop, to the barista who'd given him strange looks after his 3rd hour nursing the same cup. Cody remembered the restaurant host who'd asked if he needed help finding someone. Trick recalled the homeless man in the alley who'd watched him with knowing eyes. Had they been careful, or had they been obvious? What they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that Finn had received word about them within 6 hours of their first surveillance attempt. "3 guys," said Thomas, one of Finn's watchers, a thin man with sharp eyes and sharper instincts. "Young, tattooed. One's got his wrist wrapped. They've been rotating positions, watching your spots." Finn had been reading a newspaper at his kitchen table. He didn't look up. "Descriptions?" Thomas pulled out his phone, showed photos taken from a distance. Grainy, but clear enough. Finn recognized them immediately. "The 3 from the street," he said, almost amused. "Want me to handle it?" Finn considered. He could end this now. A phone call, a few words, and those 3 would never be a problem again. It would be clean, efficient, the way he usually handled threats. But something stopped him. "No," he said, setting down the paper. "Not yet." "Not yet?" Thomas frowned. "Boss, they're planning something. You can see it in how they move, how they watch." "I know. Then why?" "Because I want to see what they do," Finn interrupted. His eyes were distant, thoughtful. "I want to know if they're stupid enough to follow through." Thomas shifted uncomfortably. "That's a risk." "Everything's a risk," Finn replied. "But men like them, young, angry, humiliated, they operate on emotion, and emotion makes mistakes. What if they don't make mistakes?" Finn smiled that cold, empty smile. "They will. Just keep watching them. Let me know when they make their move. And then? And then I'll teach them the lesson I should have taught them the first time." Thomas nodded and left. Finn returned to his newspaper, but he wasn't reading anymore. He was thinking about those 3 men, about their wounded pride and their desperate need for revenge. He'd seen it before. Men who couldn't let go. Men who mistook survival for cowardice, who believed that accepting defeat meant accepting worthlessness. They always came back, and they always regretted it. A week after they started watching, Trick thought he'd found something. "Thursday nights," he said, jabbing his finger at the notebook. "Every Thursday, Finn walks through the market district alone. No security, no backup, just him." "How do you know?" Cody asked. "I've been watching. 3 weeks running now, same pattern." Randy looked skeptical. "A guy like Finn Dam doesn't have patterns. That's suicide." "Everyone has patterns," Trick insisted. Even him. But what Trick didn't realize, what none of them realized, was that patterns could be weapons too. Finn didn't walk through the market district every Thursday by accident. He did it because he knew they were watching, and he wanted them to find him. The trap was set, on both sides. Neither realized the other was waiting. And the next Thursday night, the night everything would end, was only 3 days away. The street that had witnessed humiliation would soon witness something far worse. Something that would make the whole neighborhood go silent. Not from violence, but from fear of what happened when men forgot that some predators hunt in the dark, and some predators let you think you're the hunter. Thursday came with a cold wind that cut through the streets like a warning. Trick stood in the cramped bathroom of his apartment, staring at his reflection in the cracked mirror. His wrist still ached when he moved it certain ways, a constant reminder of what Finn had done to him, of the humiliation he'd endured. Tonight, that changed. "You ready?" Cody called from the living room. Trick splashed cold water on his face, dried it with a threadbare towel, and walked out. Cody sat on the couch, dressed in dark clothes, his face drawn and pale. Randy stood by the window, smoking a cigarette with shaking hands. "We don't have to do this," Randy said for the 10th time that day. "Yes, we do," Trick replied. "We could just leave. Leave the city. Start over somewhere else." "And go where?" Trick asked, his voice hard. "Run away like cowards? Spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders?" Randy took a long drag, said nothing. Cody stood up, testing his ribs with careful fingers. They still hurt, but the sharp pain had dulled to a constant ache. "If we're doing this, we need to be smart. In and out. Fast. Trick nodded. He walks through the market district every Thursday around 9. Same route, same timing. We wait in the alley near the old pharmacy. When he passes, we move. And then what? Randy's voice cracked. We jump him? 3 against 1 again? That worked so well last time. Last time we weren't prepared, Trick said. Last time we didn't know who he was. Now we do. He pulled something from his jacket pocket, a tire iron, heavy and cold. Cody's eyes widened. Jesus, Trick. We're not playing games anymore, Trick said flatly. He wants to break bones? Fine. So do we. Randy stubbed out his cigarette, his hands trembling harder now. This is wrong. This is so wrong. Then leave, Trick said, meeting his eyes. Walk out that door and don't come back. I won't stop you. Randy looked at the door. For a moment, he seemed ready to take the offer. To walk away from this madness and save himself. But pride is a prison, and shame is the lock. No, Randy said quietly. I'm in. Trick smiled. Good. Let's go. The market district was quieter on Thursday nights. Most shops closed early. The few that remained open catered to late workers and insomniacs. The streets were wide enough for delivery trucks during the day, but at night they felt cavernous and empty. Trick, Cody, and Randy arrived at 8:30 and positioned themselves in the alley near the old pharmacy, just as planned. The alley was narrow, dark, lined with dumpsters that reeked of rotting produce. A perfect ambush point, or so they thought. He should be here by 9, Trick whispered, gripping the tire iron. Cody shifted his weight, eyes scanning the street. What if he doesn't show? He'll show. 3 weeks running, same pattern. He'll show. Randy said nothing. He just stood there, hands in his pockets, staring at the ground like a man at his own execution. 9 o'clock came. No Finn. 9:15. Nothing. Maybe he changed his route, Cody suggested, uncertainty creeping into his voice. No, Trick insisted. Just wait. He'll come. But as the minutes crawled by, doubt began to settle over them like fog. The street remained empty. No footsteps, no movement, just the distant hum of traffic and the occasional rustle of wind through trash. 9:30. Randy finally spoke. He's not coming. Shut up, Trick. He's not. I said shut up. Trick's voice echoed down the alley, too loud in the silence. That's when they heard it. Footsteps, not from the street they'd been watching. From behind them. All 3 spun around. And there at the mouth of the alley, silhouetted against the distant streetlights, stood Finn Dam. He wasn't walking through the market district. He was already here, waiting for them. Looking for me? Finn asked, his voice calm and conversational. Trick's blood turned to ice. How did you know you'd be here? Finn stepped into the alley, his footsteps echoing. Because I wanted you to be here. 3 weeks of walking the same route. 3 weeks of letting you watch. 3 weeks of leading you exactly where I wanted you. Cody backed up a step. This is a setup. Of course it's a setup, Finn said, almost amused. Did you really think a man in my position doesn't know when he's being followed? That I wouldn't hear about 3 idiots asking questions, watching my buildings, studying my patterns? Randy's face had gone ghostly white. Oh God, we need to... Run? Finn finished. You can try, but you won't make it far. Trick raised the tire iron, his hand shaking. Stay back. I swear to God I'll... Finn laughed. That same dark, terrifying laugh from before. You'll what? Hit me? Fight me? You couldn't beat me when it was random. You think you can beat me when I'm ready? But Trick was beyond reason now, beyond fear. He'd spent weeks nursing his wounded pride, plotting his revenge, convincing himself that this time would be different. He charged. The tire iron swung in a wide arc, aimed at Finn's head. Finn moved like smoke. He sidestepped the swing, caught Trick's extended arm, and twisted. Trick screamed as his already injured wrist bent at an unnatural angle. The tire iron clattered to the ground. Finn shoved him backward into the dumpster with enough force to dent the metal. Cody rushed forward, desperate to help, to do something. Finn's elbow caught him in the solar plexus. Cody folded like paper, gasping for air that wouldn't come. Randy didn't move. He just stood there, frozen, tears streaming down his face. Finn looked at him. Smart choice. Then he turned his attention back to Trick, who was trying to pull himself up from the ground, his breath coming in ragged sobs. I gave you a chance, Finn said, standing over him. I could have ended this the first night, but I wanted to see if you'd be smart enough to walk away." "Fuck you," Trick spat, blood on his lips. Finn crouched down, bringing himself eye level. "You want to know the difference between men like you and men like me? It's not strength. It's not numbers. It's understanding consequences." He stood up, looked at all three of them. Trick bleeding against the dumpster, Cody gasping on the ground, Randy crying silently in the shadows. "What you did tonight, following me, planning an ambush, bringing a weapon, that's not revenge. That's suicide." The alley fell silent, except for their labored breathing. "Here's what happens next," Finn continued, his voice cold and final. "You're going to disappear. Not from the city, I don't care about that, but from my sight, my streets, my world. You don't walk where I walk. You don't breathe where I breathe. You become invisible." He paused, letting the words sink in. "Because if I see you again, any of you, you won't get a beating, you won't get a warning, you'll just be gone. And nobody will ask questions. Nobody will look for you. You'll just be 3 more names that people used to know." Trick tried to speak, but no words came. "Do you understand?" Finn asked. Slowly, painfully, all 3 nodded. "Good." Finn turned and walked out of the alley, his footsteps fading into the night. Behind him, 3 broken men remained in the darkness, learning the lesson he should have taught them the first time. Some streets remember who protects them, and some names are enough to keep the whole night quiet. Morning came gray and cold. Hannah Michelle woke early, as she always did, and made her tea by the window. Steam rose from the cup in delicate spirals as she looked down at the street below. A few early commuters hurried past. A delivery truck rumbled by. The world continued its routine, but something felt different. She couldn't explain it, just a change in the air, like the moment before a storm when everything goes still. Hannah sipped her tea and watched. Across the city, in that cramped apartment that smelled like stale beer and fear, Trick sat on the couch with his head in his hands. His wrist was wrapped again, tighter this time. The pain had returned worse than before, a deep throb that radiated up his arm with every heartbeat. Cody lay on the floor, staring at the ceiling, one hand pressed against his ribs. He hadn't spoken since they'd crawled out of that alley last night. Randy sat by the window, smoking cigarette after cigarette, his hollow eyes fixed on nothing. None of them had slept. "We should go to the hospital," Cody said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "No," Trick replied without looking up. "Your wrist is—" I said no. Silence filled the room again, heavy and suffocating. Randy stubbed out his cigarette and immediately lit another. His hands still shook. They hadn't stopped shaking since Finn had walked out of that alley. "We need to leave. Today. Pack what we can and just go." This time Trick didn't argue. "Where?" Cody asked. "Anywhere," Randy said desperately. "My cousin's got a place upstate. We could crash there for a while, figure things out." Trick finally looked up. His eyes were red-rimmed, haunted. "Yeah, okay. Okay?" Cody sat up despite the pain. "Just like that?" "Just like that," Trick confirmed. "We leave. We don't come back. We forget this city exists." "What about our stuff? Our friends?" "What friends?" Trick asked bitterly. "You think anyone's going to want to be associated with us after last night?" Words probably already out. 3 idiots tried to ambush Finn Dam. 3 idiots got put down like dogs. Randy flinched at the words, but didn't disagree. "We pack light," Trick continued. "Take what matters. Leave the rest. We're on the road by noon." Cody nodded slowly. Randy just smoked. They moved through the apartment like ghosts, gathering clothes, money, whatever pieces of their lives they could fit into backpacks. Everything else, furniture, memories, the people they used to be, they left behind. By 11:30, they were ready. By noon, they were gone. The neighborhood noticed, though not immediately. It started with small absences. The coffee shop barista who'd grown used to seeing Randy nurse a single cup for hours noticed he didn't show up. The corner store owner who'd sold Trick cigarettes for years wondered why he hadn't come in. By the weekend, people began to talk. "You seen those 3 guys?" someone asked at the market. "The ones with the tattoos? Haven't seen them in days." "Me neither. Weird." But it wasn't weird. Not really. People disappeared from the neighborhood all the time, moved away, got arrested, died. The city swallowed them up and moved on. Still, there was something different about this particular absence, something that made people uncomfortable without quite knowing why. Hannah noticed it too. She'd returned to walking her usual route, the one that passed by the alley where Finn had first intervened. She still felt nervous when she walked it, still jumped at sudden sounds, but the fear was fading, slowly replaced by something else. Security. She saw Finn once, 3 days after that Thursday night. He was walking on the opposite side of the street, dressed in his usual black suit, hands in his pockets. Their eyes met for a brief moment. He nodded. She nodded back. Then he continued walking, and she did too. No words were exchanged. None were needed. Hannah understood something now that she hadn't before. Safety wasn't just about locks and lights. It was about knowing that someone, something, stood between her and the darkness. And in this neighborhood, Finn Dam was that something. At Tony's bar on the east side, a group of men sat around a table covered in empty beer bottles. They spoke in low voices, the way people do when discussing things they don't fully understand. "You hear about Trick and his crew?" one asked. "Gone," another replied. "Just up and left. You know why?" The table went quiet. Everyone knew, or thought they knew, but saying it out loud felt dangerous. Finally, someone spoke. "They messed with Finn." The name landed like a stone in water, ripples spreading outward in the silence. "Heard they tried to jump him," another added. "Set up an ambush in the market district. That's suicide." "That's what I said." "What happened?" The man who'd spoken shrugged. "Nobody knows for sure, but Trick's gone. Cody's gone. Randy's gone. And Finn's still here." Another silence. "You think he killed them?" "No," someone else said. "If he killed them, we'd have heard. Bodies would have turned up. This is worse." "What's worse than killing?" The man leaned back, his eyes distant. "Making them run. Making them so scared they'd rather disappear than stay in their own city. That's worse. That's power." The others nodded slowly, understanding settling over them like fog. Finn Dam hadn't just beaten 3 men. He'd erased them. Without killing them. Without even trying. He'd simply made it clear that existing in his world, in his sight, was more terrifying than running away from everything they knew. Word spread the way these things do. Whispered conversations, knowing looks, stories told in bars and back alleys. The details changed with each telling, growing more elaborate, more terrifying. Some said Finn had broken all 3 of them so badly they couldn't walk. Others claimed he'd made them disappear into the river. A few insisted he'd simply looked at them, and they'd run. None of the stories were entirely true, but all of them carried the same message. Don't mess with Finn Dam. Don't even think about it. The street where Hannah had been surrounded became quieter after that. Not empty people still walked it, still lived there but different, safer. Young men who might have caused trouble thought twice, watched their behavior. Crossed to the other side when they saw elderly people walking alone. Not out of kindness, out of fear, because they all knew now what happened to people who forgot whose streets these were, and whose protection mattered more than their pride. 2 weeks after that Thursday night, Hannah Michelle walked to the market in the late afternoon. The sun was setting, painting the buildings in shades of amber and gold. The air had turned warmer, carrying the first hints of spring. She walked slowly, her cane tapping its familiar rhythm against the pavement, her grocery bag swinging gently at her sides. She felt different now. Lighter, somehow. The constant fear that had followed her since that first night had faded, replaced by something quieter. Not quite confidence, but close. The knowledge that she could walk these streets and return home safely. As she turned onto her street, the narrow one with the flickering lights and the old brick buildings, she saw a figure ahead. A man in a black suit, standing near the alley where this had all begun. Finn Dam. He was looking at his phone, seemingly unaware of her approach. But as she drew closer, he glanced up and their eyes met. Hannah stopped a few feet away, unsure what to say. What do you say to a man who saved your life, who terrified you almost as much as the men he'd saved you from? "Mrs. Michelle," Finn said, his voice polite but distant. "Mr. Dam," she replied, testing the name she'd learned from neighborhood whispers. He smiled faintly. "Just Finn is fine." An awkward silence settled between them. Hannah shifted her grocery bags, searching for words. "I never properly thanked you," she said finally. "For what you did." Finn shook his head. "You don't owe me thanks. I did what needed to be done." "Still," Hannah insisted, "you didn't have to help me. Most people wouldn't have." "Most people aren't in a position to help," Finn corrected gently. "That's different from choosing not to." Hannah considered this. The 3 men. They're gone, aren't they? Finn's expression remained neutral. "They chose to leave, that's all. Because you made them. Because they realized staying was a bad idea." Hannah studied his face, the hard lines, the cold eyes, the tattoos that marked him as something other than ordinary. "Are you a good man, Mr. Dam?" The question seemed to surprise him. He was quiet for a moment, genuinely considering. "No," he said finally. "I'm not a good man, but I protect what's mine. And this street is yours? This street, this neighborhood, the people who live here and mind their own business." He paused. "People like you." Hannah felt something shift in her understanding. Finn Dam wasn't a hero. He wasn't some guardian angel watching over the innocent. He was something more complicated, a predator who marked territory and protected it not out of kindness, but out of ownership. And yet, the result was the same. She was safe. "Well," Hannah said softly, "thank you anyway, for protecting what's yours." Finn nodded once. "You have a good evening, Mrs. Michelle." He turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows of the alley as smoothly as he'd emerged from them 2 weeks ago. Hannah stood there for a moment, watching the space where he'd been. Then she continued walking, her bags lighter than they'd felt in years. The weeks that followed settled into routine. Hannah walked her streets without fear. The market, the pharmacy, the small park where she sometimes fed pigeons on sunny afternoons. Life returned to normal, or as normal as it had ever been. But the neighborhood had changed in subtle ways. People were more careful now, more aware. They looked out for each other in ways they hadn't before. Not out of community spirit exactly, but out of the shared understanding that this place was watched, protected, that certain behaviors would be noticed and dealt with. The elderly walked without harassment, the weak walked without being preyed upon, and the predators, the ones who remained, learned to hunt elsewhere. Finn continued his work, whatever that work was. Hannah saw him occasionally, always at a distance. He'd nod. She'd nod back. Neither spoke, but there was an understanding between them now. An unspoken acknowledgement of what had happened and what it meant. She was under his protection, and he was true to his word. One evening, about a month after everything had happened, Hannah sat by her window with her tea, watching the street below as the sun set. A young woman walked past, alone, carrying shopping bags. She looked nervous, her eyes darting to the shadows. Hannah understood that fear, had lived with it for years. But as she watched, she saw the woman's shoulders relax slightly as she continued down the street unmolested. No one followed her. No one called out. She simply walked home safely, the way everyone should be able to. Hannah smiled into her tea. The street had changed, not because it had become kind or gentle or safe in any absolute sense, but because someone had claimed it, had drawn a line, and made it clear what happened to those who crossed it. Some might call that tyranny. Hannah called it protection. And in a city that could be cruel and indifferent, protection mattered more than philosophy. Late that same night, Finn stood on a rooftop overlooking the neighborhood. Below, the streets were quiet. A few cars passed. A couple walked hand in hand. An old man walked his dog. Normal, peaceful, unremarkable. Exactly as it should be. Thomas appeared beside him, silent as always. "Everything's quiet, boss." "Good. You think those 3 will ever come back?" Finn considered. "No, they're too smart for that now. And if they do?" Finn's expression hardened. "Then they're not as smart as I thought. And the problem solves itself." Thomas nodded and disappeared back into the shadows. Finn remained on the rooftop for a while longer, watching his streets, his neighborhood, his territory. He wasn't a good man. He knew that, had known it for years, but he was a man who kept his word. And he'd promised, without saying it out loud, that these streets would be safe for those who belonged here, for Hannah Michelle and people like her, for those who just wanted to walk home with their groceries and drink tea by their windows without fear. It wasn't nobility, it was ownership, but in the end, the result was the same. The city moved on, as cities do. New stories replaced old ones. New dramas unfolded, new threats emerged and were dealt with. But in that small neighborhood, on that narrow street with the flickering lights and the old brick buildings, people remembered. They remembered the night an elderly woman had been surrounded. They remembered the man in the black suit who'd stepped out of the shadows. And they remembered what happened to those who forgot that some streets belonged to someone, that some names carried weight enough to make violence unnecessary. That silence, true silence, born of respect and fear, was more powerful than any shout. Hannah Michelle lived another 5 years in that apartment. She walked those streets until her legs wouldn't carry her anymore. And in all that time, No one bothered her. No one threatened her. No one made her afraid. When she finally passed quietly, in her sleep, surrounded by the small comforts of a life well lived, the neighborhood mourned, and Finn Dam, who had never spoken more than a dozen words to her, made sure her funeral was attended by more people than she'd ever known she'd touched. Because some debts can't be repaid, but they can be remembered. And on that narrow street, with its flickering lights and its long memory, they remembered everything. The night 3 men learned fear. The night an old woman learned she was protected. The night the whole street went silent, and stayed that way. Thanks for sticking with this story until the very end. You're the reason these stories feel alive. If you're ready for another powerful journey, just tap the next video on your screen. And before you go, leave a quick comment and rate this story from 1 to 10. I'm excited to read your thoughts and connect with you in the comments.